All right, so I have this lovely lady, Jennifer, on with me, and I want to thank you for joining us because I know that a lot of people need to hear your message and about your journey. And so, why don't you just tell us, what life was like a little more than 3 months ago?
All right, Denise. Thank you for that. When I started, or before I started with you, I have to say I was very anxious, overwhelmed with, work and what was going on in my life, and definitely had tried almost anything, any kind of seminar, self-help books, listening to podcasts, reading books, and was falling into that sort of like victim mentality. I was a victim. There was a lot of villains out there and just very overwhelmed with my life. Um, my career, I've grown up the ranks, and as you do so, you get more responsibility and a lot more, I would say, pressures that come at you. And I was having a hard time navigating through all of that. And so when I came to, started to talk with you, it was really, I was just really, I would say I was really broken. I was at the lowest of lows that I think that I've ever been at. And I was looking for something that would help me to get through that, to break through essentially all of the pain that I was in. So, starting with you and really, I have to say that your approach, I've done a lot of things, and I think you and I calculated the hours that I've done with self-help in my lifetime, and there's been a lot. But I have to say, the big difference between, I would say, doing some of the bigger programs that are out there, nothing wrong with the Tony Robbins did all of that, but it's just the level of, I would say, intimacy in terms of feeling comfortable being vulnerable, feeling comfortable in terms of, you know, having a close-knit group of women leaders who are just like me. Um, you have this great way of doing a combination of personal coaching as well as the group. And there were times when the group would help coach me through something. And there were times when I would sit through and participate in someone else's coaching um, issues. And with that, I would learn on both sides of that. So there was that piece, which I would call, the method of this program. But then there's also just all of the modules that really resonate. And, starting from, just understanding my Enneagram type and what that means for me, to rewriting that really icky narrative that was going on into something more powerful, was huge up front. And then everything along the way just really clicked into place for areas that I didn't even think that I needed help on, to be honest with you. And I found um, it's for me that all of those modules, as they came up and clicked in, they're like a toolkit for me. There are days, obviously, where I get triggered and there are situations that are happening, but I can reach into the toolkit. Sometimes it's just breathing. Sometimes it's bigger than that, and I need to add my favorite steer model that you always do, and walking through a situation. And then there's sometimes where I have to do five different things, but there's this kit of tools that I can go back to and really help pull myself out of the wobble.
Awesome. Can you give me an example of something that you didn't think you needed to learn, but you
Okay.
learned?
Yes, absolutely. One of the big ones, I always thought that I was really good at prioritizing, really good at prioritizing an organization. My background is in planning. And so that was what I thought I was, just very good at all of those things. And I think when we hit the module on overwhelm and productivity, and I started to unpack my schedule and looking at my calendar, I realized, and in talking with a group and with you, I mean, I only had maybe a half an hour within my entire day that wasn't with a meeting, and everything was stacked. And I think you would remember this, my before and after, and you had challenged me and said, what would really great look like on your calendar? And I said, well, half of my day, frankly, would be open so that I could think, and then I can and be more strategic. And you said, well, how do you get there? And so it helped me because I started to then, look at my calendar and peel back meetings that were reoccurring and we weren't really getting anything done there. I would take meetings on a walk, things like that. And it completely changed the way I do work, the way that I approach things, that the overwhelm. There are times, that I do feel overwhelmed, but the majority of my week is not walking into overwhelm, if that makes sense. So for me, that was one of the biggest things. Um, yes, that helped me out. So
And
thank you.
you are a good planner, just like most of the people I talk to. They have the skills. They've taken the classes. They know how to prioritize and all this stuff. But it's the underlying fears that we have and the habits that we have and the fear of, pissing someone off, fear of not rising in our career if we make the wrong decision, say no to the wrong thing.
Yeah,
You had to get beyond those. And
absolutely.
then once you got clear of all that, it was almost like a no-brainer. Oh, well, yeah, I can do that. And I gave you some tips on how to
Yeah,
prioritize and stuff, but you already knew that stuff. It was your inner story and your fears that were blocking that. So yeah,
absolutely.
there's a reason we do it in that order.
Yeah, and honestly, like if I think about that too, I definitely had a belief. I had a belief about meetings, and I had a belief that I had to meet with a lot of people in order for me to have good relationships. And I think what was interesting is because my meetings were so frequent and half an hour and jumping right into the next, I think you asked the question, or even the group asked, what is the quality of your relationships when you meet like that? And it was, to be truthful, not very good. I wasn't present. I was scattered. I had to get work done. So while I'm talking to someone, I'm looking at another screen. And that's not who I want to be as a leader or as a person. I want to show up and be present and be curious. And I think that was one of the things that was also just an artifact out of just simply making space and time in my calendar and I'll be more present and mindful in the meetings that I do have. So that's been a huge impact.
So if you think about your state back then, how long had you been trying to fix this feeling of overwhelm and getting out of this low of the lows? And I think you were even thinking like you might have to quit
Oh
in
yes.
order.
Yeah, absolutely, Denise. I started the current job that I'm in right at the beginning of the pandemic. So, part of that was everything was virtual, everything was online, and a very large company. So, the pandemic, what is that, 2.5, 3? We're getting on 3 years now. So I would say for the past 3 years, I have been just in complete overwhelm until I, started on this program. And it it has it was as if I was dreading work. I didn't even, I was just chasing the day. I kept thinking, wishing it would get better. It'll get better once the pandemic is over, once we can be in an office, once I can get outside my house, once the economy recovers. And then I was just finding that the waiting is not happening. This has to happen I have to kind of take charge of this and get a hold of this. And that's what's really great too, is that it put the power back with me. So instead of waiting for an external event to happen, like the pandemic going away and things like that, but actually put the power back in me so that I can control my own destiny instead of being so reactive in my life.
Well said. Yes. Now, instead of being a victim, you have the power.
Absolutely.
Okay. So how
Absolutely.
are you showing up differently now at work, at home? What's changed?
It's so many things, Denise. First of all, I'm very excited to go into work now. So instead of being fearful for meetings and just the complete overwhelm and how I going to get anything done, I'm excited to go to work. And I'm also very present, curious. The relationships that I have with my peers and my bosses and, skip level up are so much better because of that. I'm not walking in with either armored up with defense, but more, I'm wondering why, they're acting this way or why they're asking these questions. So it's actually it's a much more calm place for me to be. So showing it up in that way. And I would say that the relationships that I have are just so much better. And I'm not, in terms of my personal life, I'm not complaining all the time about what's going on at work. I'm actually excited, and life has just become more light. I don't know how else to say it. It's just a much more positive place for me to be in.
Yeah, you feel more light and you are lighter to be around.
Yes,
And you are a light. I mean, when you go into those meetings as that present, curious, non-judgmental, confident person, then that is contagious to everybody else.
absolutely.
And you've given me example after example of people who are now coming to you, as the sage, as the person they can talk to, as the person who can help bring the calm presence to it. Whereas before, that was not available to you.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think too, with that, I mean, trust me, there are times when I wobble, when I get defensive, but I think it's just also there's just this awareness. Once I start feeling that icky, I don't know what else to call it. When you start feeling that, ugh, and I can step back and actually think, what's going on with me? Do I need to steer something? Do I need to like separate myself from the emotion? And then also, it's that whole piece that you teach about what would you rather feel in this moment? So it kind of just stops the rumination, if you will, and all of the things that typically go down that path of story. And then I can just, weave this, evil tale that's happening. And it's been really, really great to have that again, that tool to just kind of step back and see it for what it is, and get myself out of just feeling that victim, and this whole story that's not serving anyone well, to be honest with you, myself and others.
All right. Well, I'm just extraordinarily happy for you. And what would you say to people well, first tell us, do you remember how many hours we calculated you'd probably spent on
I don't
self-help seminars and
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was thousands of hours,
it was in
Denise.
the thousands. I think it was
Yeah,
17,000 hours,
yeah,
which you just happened to have, a schedule and you knew when you listened to podcasts and all that. So we
yes,
just calculated the days. But so there was that time where
yes,
you were seeking and trying. And
yes,
then there was the time when you were waiting for the world to change.
yes.
And what would you say to people who are waiting?
I would I would say the wait, if you wait, nothing's going to happen. Like you need to do something about it. And I mean, if you are anyone like me, I would just highly recommend talking to you, Denise, just to see if this is a good fit, to be honest with you, because it has been the one the one thing over the 17,000 hours that I have done that has actually made a huge change in my life. So I get emotional, but I thank you because it has truly changed who I am and how I show up as a person. And you can't put a price tag on your peace of mind and your happiness and having the power to really affect that, really affect that. So thank you.